Okay, folks, so I want to stick with this theme here with the weather modification and present a little more information. And there's a file here that I thought was kind of interesting. I want to share a couple paragraphs from, and this is from 1974. This is from Top Secret Hearing held on March 20th, 1974, made public on May 19th, 1974. And the date for this particular session was January 25th and March 20th, 1974. And this is the Subcommittee on Oceans and International Environment of the Committee on Foreign Relations, United States Senate, 93rd Congress. And there's a couple of really interesting paragraphs and some interesting information that I want to share from that, just to further compound the fact that this has been ongoing for a very long time. And they've established themselves this legal ground that is going to be hard to challenge, but it most definitely can be challenged, and it needs to be challenged. And this is another interesting file. There's something interesting that was referenced in this World Meteorological Organization's publication on the provisional state of the global climate. And now they have a revised version of this, which was published just recently, within the last couple weeks. But I'm having a hard time finding the PDF file on that right now. So as soon as I do find their updated version of their provisional state of the global climate coming from the World Meteorological Organization, you better believe I'm going to be sharing some of it, I'm sure. But I thought it was kind of curious here that they actually mentioned something about COVID too. Estimated mortality due to the heat is complicated by changes in background death rates due to COVID. Yeah, so now their data sets on all of the studies that they were doing up until COVID are all skewed now, because COVID stepped in and interrupted. So now they can't give us a proper estimate of the number of deaths that were due to the heat. All they can do is just guess, right? And they say here, nevertheless, some official estimates have been made, including around 2,800 deaths in the UK, among those aged 65 and older, 4,500 in Germany, and 11,000 in France, that perished due to excessive heat conditions. Yeah. But it's also very interesting that they mention Hurricane Ian here too. And now Dane Wigington had covered this, and several other sky watchers and weather watchers as well. I know that there were at least two other channels other than Dane Wigington that were tracking this whole system when it occurred, and they were pointing out the little anomalies, as they would call them, and they were showing how their little weather satellite station was influencing this hurricane. And I find it curious that the World Meteorological Organization would reference this in their little PDF file on the state of the global climate. Yeah, because this was most definitely influenced by man. I'm going to state that very categorically and very matter-of-factly, because it can be proven very simply, and it has been proven. Hurricane Ian, or Ian, as some people might want to say, I don't know, potato, right? In late September, Hurricane Ian formed in the western Caribbean. On September 27th, Hurricane Ian crossed western Cuba before intensifying to Category 4 and making landfall in southwest Florida on 28 September. Bringing extensive storm surge inundation in low-lying coastal areas and river flooding further northeast, where 4-day rainfalls exceeded 500 millimeters in the Daytona Beach area. Ian made landfall with sustained 10-minute winds of 240 kilometers per hour, 150 miles per hour, the fourth strongest landfall on record in Florida. 131 deaths were reported in the U.S., with additional loss of life in Cuba. And that was how this publication pretty much ended their little statement here, because after that, they start talking about the contributors. Look at the list of contributors that contributed to this little state of the global climate thing. I mean, and it goes on. It goes on and on and on. And then you have the World Meteorological members. Look at all of these people, folks. When you have these many people and these many tools in your toolbox, there's the UN agencies involved in preparing this report and backing it up. There's all your institutions involved in it. Yeah, when you have this many tools in your toolbox, it don't matter if the tools are defunct and archaic. They can still be used as tools if they're willing to propagate the propaganda. And that's really pretty much where the state that we're at now when it comes to pitching this global warming stuff. And for people to say that it has never been used as a weapon, I'll debate that and I'll argue that, because this file right here, even in particular, mentions it a couple of different times. And this was back in 1974 when they were having these discussions about weather modification and regulating it and creating an international treaty on weather modification. And they themselves have published all the documents and the information that says that they have absolutely used weather as a weapon. weather warfare. Yeah. And in this publication here, actually, wait a minute, I want to go back here real quick, because I do want to cover a little bit of what was in the resolution as well. But the writing on this paper is really blurry because I was running out of ink, and I couldn't find the full PDF file, so I had to kind of copy like pages of a book. So, yeah, this is one of the opening statements here, and it gives reasoning for the objective of the Senate Resolution 71. And it says here, let's see if I can get it to focus on the camera. I don't know, though, the wording on this is really blurry too, so I don't know if it's going to really focus very well. Yeah, I don't know. The objective of Senate Resolution 71 has been endorsed by several national and international organizations. On the international level, the North Atlantic Assembly, at its 18th meeting in November of 1972, recommended a treaty to ban environmental or geophysical modification except for peaceful purposes. Domestically, in 1971, the National Academy of Sciences Committee on Atmospheric Sciences urged the U.S. government to present for adoption by the United Nations General Assembly a resolution dedicating all weather modification efforts to peaceful purposes. Yeah, for the good of humanity. Yeah, the President's National Advisory Committee on Oceans and Atmosphere, in its first annual report in 1972, strongly recommended that the United States seek international arrangements to renounce hostile uses of weather modification. Yeah, after they'd already caused plenty of damage, right? Again, in 1972, the Sierra Club joined the Federation of American Scientists in urging that the United States should henceforth dedicate all geophysical and environmental research to peaceful purposes and should actively seek the cooperation of other nations in programs of joint research on geophysical phenomena, their control, and their peaceful use. All they needed was just a handful of tools in their toolbox, right? However, and this is where it gets good, despite the wide support for this concept, the administration has failed to articulate a national policy on weather modification. This is due primarily to the intransigence of the U.S. military establishment. And the word intransigence means that they are unwavering, unwilling to abandon their ways. You know, they're refusing to budge on their position and stopping it. And as far as this weather modification and deploying these weather modification systems using our military, I've never approved of it, and I never will. Anyway, the military branches of our government have steadfastly opposed the development of any policy in order to keep all their options open in the field of environmental modification. Well, that's a lot of power. That's a whole lot of power that the military branches of the government had wielded in steadfastly opposing the development of any policy in order to keep all of their options open in the field of environmental modification. This response is, in my opinion, a short-sighted, reflexive reaction. It does not represent a carefully considered, well-developed national policy. However, until such a policy surfaces, the military will have the freedom to indiscriminately experiment and operationally use this technology. Yeah. Let that sink in. And this was in a subcommittee. This was presented in information to our so-called leaders and representatives. This is a situation which I find extremely distressing. Me too. If we do not restrict the military use of current environmental modification techniques, we risk the danger of the development of vastly more dangerous techniques whose consequences may be unknown or may cause irreparable damage to our global environment. Yeah. Military use of such techniques will affect the very important peaceful international scientific efforts now underway under the auspices of the World Meteorological Organization and the International Council of Scientific Unions. Such programs as the Global Atmospheric Research Program and Earthwatch. Yeah, let's see. I think that is on the screen. Yeah, there we go. Instead of its official silence and actions condoning a gradual drift into environmental warfare, the administration should actively explore the advantages of a renunciation of such operations and the possible benefits stemming from an initiative for a multilateral, no first use, in quotations, agreement. It is imperative that the United States enunciate a national policy on this subject, in no way blocking their development and in no way moving forward in the enlargement of human knowledge, but simply dedicating these efforts to peaceful purposes. I hope that these hearings will spur the administration into some form of action to develop such a policy. as well as enlarging the body of knowledge available to the American public as to what geophysical and weather modifications actually imply. And then the following is the text of the Senate Resolution 71. And I can go into a little bit of that too if you're still watching and you want to watch. Hey, why not? So to me, it's kind of interesting that back at this time, you know, that it's pretty much stated there, pretty much how it is now. That the military, and it's not just the U.S. military, the military in every country have taken so much liberty and taken upon themselves to just do these things without public consent. And now they're trying to sell it. They used it as a weapon. And now they are trying to peddle it to the younger generation as this saving grace. It's going to save the planet and save us. How incredibly insane and sick and psychotic are these people, really, when you look at it? The people involved in this shit. I swear. In this Senate Resolution 71, report number 93 to 270, in the Senate of the United States, February 22nd, 1973. And in this resolution here, June 11th, 1973, considered, amended, and agreed to. Resolution. Expressing the sense of the Senate that the United States government should seek the agreement of other governments to a proposed treaty prohibiting the use of any environmental or geophysical modification activity as a weapon of war or the carrying out of any research or experimentation directed thereto. Whereas there is vast scientific potential for human betterment through environmental and geophysical controls, and whereas there is great danger to the world ecological system if environmental and geophysical modification activities are not controlled or if used indiscriminately, and whereas the development of weapon-oriented environmental and geophysical modification activities will create a threat in peace and world order, and I'll try to keep it on the screen too. Whereas the United States government should seek agreement with other governments on the complete cessation of any research, experimentation, or use of any such activity as a weapon of war. Now, therefore, be it resolved that it is the sense of the Senate that the United States government should seek the agreement of other governments, including all permanent members of the Security Council of the United Nations, to a treaty along the following general lines, which will provide for the complete cessation of any research, experimentation, and use of any environmental or geophysical modification activity as a weapon of war. The parties to this treaty, recognizing the vast scientific potential for human betterment through environmental and geophysical controls, aware of the great danger to the world ecological system of uncontrolled and indiscriminate use of environmental and geophysical modification activities, recognizing that the development of weapon-oriented environmental and geophysical modification techniques will create a threat to peace and world order, proclaiming as their principal aim the achievement of an agreement on the complete cessation of research, experimentation, and use of environmental and geophysical modification activities as weapons of war, have agreed as follows in Article 1. Wait, let me make sure I got it on the screen here. There we go. The states parties to this treaty undertake to prohibit and prevent at any place any environmental or geophysical modifications activity as a weapon of war. But what if you're doing it secretly? The prohibition in paragraph 1 of this article shall also apply to any research or experimentation directed to the development of any such activity as a weapon of war, but shall not apply to any research, experimentation, or use for peaceful purposes. The states parties to this treaty undertake not to assist, encourage, or induce any state to carry out activities referred to in paragraph 1 of this article, and not to participate in any other way in such actions. Article 2. In this treaty, the term environmental or geophysical modification activity includes any of the following activities. Any weather modification activity which has as a purpose or has as one of its principal effects a change in the atmospheric conditions over any part of the Earth's surface, including, but not limited to, any activity designed to increase or decrease precipitation, increase or suppress hail, lightning, or fog, and direct or divert storm systems. Any climate modification activity which has as a purpose or has as one of the principal effects a change in the long-term atmospheric conditions over any part of the Earth's surface. Yeah. Any earthquake modification activity which has as a purpose or has as one of its principal effects the release of the strain energy instability within the solid rock layers beneath the Earth's crust. Well, that's pretty specific, huh? Yeah. Any ocean modification activity which has as a purpose or has as one of its principal effects a change in the ocean currents or the creation of a seismic disturbance of the ocean, tidal wave in parentheses there. Article 3. 5 years after the entry into force of this treaty, a conference of parties shall be held at Geneva, Switzerland, in order to review the operation of this treaty with a view to assuring that the purposes of the preamble and the provisions of the treaty are being realized. Sorry, folks, it's hard to read it. This print is just so blurry. Sorry. Let's see. For provisions of the treaty are being realized. Such review shall take into account any relevant technological developments in order to determine whether the definition in Article 2 should be amended. Yeah, Article 4. Any party may propose an amendment to this treaty. The text of any proposed amendment shall be submitted in the depository governments, which shall circulate it to all parties to this treaty. Therefore, if requested to do so by 1/3 or more of the parties, the depository governments shall convene a conference in which they shall invite all the parties to consider such an amendment. Any amendment to this treaty shall be approved by a majority of the votes of all the parties to this treaty. The amendment shall enter into force for all parties upon the deposit of instruments of ratification by a majority of all the parties. Yeah, I doubt very seriously that there were very many civilians and public people weighing in on it. Article 5. This treaty shall be of unlimited duration. Each party shall, in exercising its national sovereignty, have the right to withdraw from the treaty if it decides that extraordinary events related to the subject matter of this treaty have jeopardized the supreme interests of its country. It shall give notice of such withdrawal to all other parties to the treaty 3 months in advance. Again, that's pretty specific. Article 6. This treaty shall be open to all states for signature. Any state which does not sign this treaty before its entry into force in accordance with paragraph 3 of this article may accede to it at any time. This treaty shall be subject to ratification by signatory states. Instruments of ratification and instruments of succession shall be deposited with the governments of the United States of America, and then there's some blank there, blank and blank, which are hereby designated the depository governments. This treaty shall enter into force after its ratification by the states, the governments of which are designated depositaries of the treaty. For states whose instruments of ratification or accession are deposited subsequent to the entry into force of this treaty, it shall enter into force on the date of the deposit of their instruments of ratification or accession. The depositary governments shall promptly inform all signatory and acceding states of the date of each signature, the date of deposit of each instrument of ratification of and accession to this treaty, the date of its entry into force, and the date of receipt of any request for conference or other notices. This treaty shall be registered by the depositary governments pursuant to Article 102 of the Charter of the United Nations. So, there's some very interesting statements here that have been made in this particular publication here, too. And maybe I don't know, if there's, maybe I'll do a little bit more.
It calls for us taking the steps now that will make us no longer second in space and in science. It lays the predicate and the foundation for a space communication satellite that will permit the people of the world to see one television program at the same time throughout the world. Think about that kind of communication, and think about the opportunity that will provide. It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world. To control the weather, 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 control the world, control the world, control the world, control the world.
Man, because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad. I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.